Welcome back to Giant Monster Games! My name is Adrian, and I heard the internet likes cats. So we are going to do a super budget cat deck today. But before I actually break the deck down, if you want to pick this deck up or any deck up in paper, go over to Flipside Gaming, use promo code Giant Monster Games, and you'll get 10% off your online purchase. Or if you want to pick this deck up for MTGO, I have a link below this video where you can pick it up on Card Hoarder. It is fast, easy, and awesome. Helps the channel out as well. Now let's get into it, starting out with what kind of cats do we actually have in the deck? Well, the first two cards we have are Loam Lion and Fleecemane Lion. Both of these are just high value cats. Loam Lion obviously is a 1/1 for 1, but if we have a forest, it gets a +1/+2, so it's basically a zoo card. It's just high value, low cost. Fleecemane Lion is also a high value creature because it is a 3/3 for 2, so already above the curve there, and it has Monstrosity 1, so when we pay for it to become monstrous, it gets +1/+1 in this case, and it also becomes hexproof and indestructible, meaning our opponent is going to have to deal with us having an extremely hard to kill creature. It's going to be really hard, and we're going to use this to run over our opponent once we get to the late game because we're a little bit of a go wide late game mid-range deck, so this guy's going to help us get there. The next two cats we have are actually probably the two best cats in the deck. We have Regal Caracal and Pride Sovereign. Both of these guys, for one, create 1/1 white cats that have lifelink, which is fantastic. Plus, Regal Caracal actually is also a lord, a cat lord if you will, that allows our creatures to get +1/+1, cat creatures that is, and lifelink. So we're becoming a quite lifelink heavy deck once we get this guy out. Pride Sovereign also has the added benefit of getting +1/+1 for each other cat we control. Seeing as how every single one of our creatures, all 27 of them, are cats, this guy usually is going to come in not as a 2/2. He's usually going to come in as like a 3/3, 4/4, 5/5. You get the idea, because we're going to have a lot of cats. And then we can always use him to make more cats that have lifelink, which is freaking awesome if you ask me. So these two guys are going to be your staple. They are your winning cards of the deck. But we are also leaning into the lifelink thing a little bit, so we actually have Sacred Cat and Ajani's Pridemate as well in the deck. Sacred Cat, obviously just a 1/1 for 1 that has lifelink, but we can also bring it back out of our graveyard, so if it gets killed, we can always bring it back. We can use it as a chump blocker, and it keeps returning a little bit. Well, returns once. It doesn't return again and again and again, just once. But Ajani's Pridemate is really where we are going to shine at this deck, because we have a lot of lifelink. We have a lot of ways of gaining a little bit of life here and there, so Ajani's Pridemate actually kind of makes sense, which surprised me when I put him in. I'm like, I'm gonna try him out, and he actually works really well, because he's gonna come down as a 2/2 for 2, normally, and at that point, whatever, he's literally middle of the road, nothing special. But as the game goes on, especially once you get to the late game, and you have 5 or 6 creatures that all have lifelink and doing a little bit of damage here and there, he gets really big really fast. He's not doing like the Soul Sisters get big, but he's gonna be getting really big as the game progresses because, as I said before, we are a mid-rangey, late game kind of deck. We are okay with getting to turn 6, 7, 8, and that's where we're gonna win. And Ajani's Pridemate, once we get to turn 6, 7, 8, is usually gonna be like a 5/5 or 6/6. So he is worth playing in the deck, super fun, and actually, again, might look kind of weird because we don't have all the Soul Sisters stuff in the deck, but actually works really well because of all of our lifelink cats. And the last two cats we have in the deck, we have Healer of the Pride and Qasali Pridemage. Yeah, that's a good one for you, Qasali. And we are going to be using these guys as utility cards of the deck. Healer of the Pride, obviously going to be getting us a little bit more lifelink, a little more life gain, so we can be triggering our Pridemate a little bit more. It also allows us to stabilize. If we get this guy out on turn 4, turn 5, we do get to stabilize a little bit more and kind of hopefully get to the late game because we are a go-wide strategy. We are aiming to get a whole bunch of stuff on the table and then swing into our opponent's face. So one of the many ways, we're only running one of it because it's like probably one of the weaker cards in the deck, but it is still a pretty good card for our specific build, that is. Qasali Pridemate, on the other hand, is just kind of he's really a utility card in this deck. For one, he can destroy target artifact or enchantment if we sacrifice him, so he is our only real way of getting rid of artifacts and enchantments, because our sideboard is more geared towards other things. But he also has Exalted, which means if a creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I mean, a creature we control, that is, not just our opponent. A creature we control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So in a lot of cases, this can be our way of slowly chipping into our opponent, getting a little bit of extra damage in, and not having to put ourselves at risk because we can play it safe a little bit. So those are all of our cats. What about our catnip, or the things that are going to make our creatures bigger, better, faster, and stronger? Well, we have Spear of Heliod and Enter the Unknown. Both of these cards, as I said, are going to make our stuff bigger. Spear of Heliod makes creatures we control give +1/+1, plus we can also use it to destroy other creatures that deal damage to us. So again, if our opponent is playing Death Shadow, if our opponent is playing Tarmogoyf, if our opponent's playing stuff that we know we need to get rid of, we can use Spear of Heliod to actually like call those creatures off, which is going to become relevant in some cases because we can't just always be blocking everything, and we sometimes just need to just immediately kill something. This is going to do it for us. And then Enter the Unknown is a card I did not expect to put in the deck. Obviously, when I was testing and building this deck, this card was not legal in Modern, and then basically 2 days ago, when I started recording this video, getting ready for it, this card became legal in Modern. I was like, oh, I'm gonna totally try this card out in the deck. So it is, for people that want to know what the card actually does, it is Target Creature Explores. Reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it is a land, which is cool. Otherwise, put a 1/1 counter on that creature and you may put that card back on top or into your graveyard. So we kind of get a scry 1, or we get to put a land into our hand, and then we may play an additional land this turn. So if we play this on turn 2, so we play one of our 1-drops on turn 1, and we play this on turn 2, or even turn 3, we are actually potentially ramping mana or making that creature bigger. Usually, we want to ramp mana with this card. Pretty neat if you ask me. It's working really well. Okay, enough talking about catnip cards. Let's talk about removal. We have Celestial Flare and Oblivion Ring. Celestial Flare obviously could be upgraded to Path to Exile. People are wondering. Down the road in the upgrade section, Celestial Flare, target player sacrifices an attacking or blocking creature. It gets the job done. If our opponent is attacking you with just one thing, or if our opponent decides he's going to block with just one thing, Celestial Flare is going to be fantastic. And then Oblivion Ring, this sees play in all kinds of decks. You guys have seen it before. It is when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent, so we can get rid of big creatures, we can get rid of artifacts, enchantments, whatever we need to get rid of, as long as it's not a land, unfortunately. Then, when it leaves the battlefield, that card gets returned to our opponent, so you can use this to get rid of whatever may be giving you a pain in the butt. It's more often better than Celestial Flare because we actually get to target what we're going to get rid of. Okay, I think you guys get the point. Let's move over to our land package now. We have Fortified Village, Sunpetal Grove, Plains, and Forests. Obviously, I would love to run more double lands in this case, but because we are a $40 deck, Sunpetal Grove is like $2 right now, so I didn't want to run a full playset of them because it gets a little bit more expensive, push our budget up to like $50 if we did that. But if you guys are looking to upgrade this deck, this is Sunpetal Grove. Running 4 of them is a really good, really cheap way of upgrading it and making this deck a lot more consistent. And that is the entire deck. If you guys are going to play this on an FNM though, you're going to want a sideboard. So let's talk about some sideboard right now. First thing we have is Brave the Elements and Dusk/Dawn. So Brave the Elements is dealing with some go wide removal stuff. A lot of times if we're playing up against a red deck or anything that has red, they're going to be either using Pyroplasm or Anger the Gods. Brave the Elements is going to prevent most of your creatures from dying if we do get one of those on us, and or there's a lot of other things that we could potentially use this on. We can use it if our opponent's going to be, say, swinging with a Stompy deck. We can use it protection from green, block a whole bunch of stuff. Brave the Elements, you'll find a lot of good uses for it. And then Dusk Dawn is actually helping us wipe the board against other big decks. So if we're going up against Eldrazi Tron and our opponent drops a bunch of really big stuff, we get to remove all of them, for starters. And then the Dawn side of it is actually a really relevant ability as well, because almost all of our creatures have power 2 or less. So when we play Dawn, we get to remove a ton of stuff from our graveyard back to our hand. So if we're playing against a mill deck, or playing against just a heavy control deck, or if we are just going late, we can actually be using this to give us that last end of the game finisher if we are against a deck that is going to be wiping away our stuff really quickly. Obviously, if we're going up against a combo deck, we're not going to side this in because combo decks don't really wipe your board so much. They usually kind of just try and race you faster in a lot of cases. So those are the first 2 cards we have. The next 2 cards, we have Celestial Purge and Tormod's Crypt. Celestial Purge, obviously just getting rid of some painful black and or red permanents that we may be running up against. So if you're going up against 8-Rack, it helps out with a little bit of that. Helps out against Death Shadow, helps out against a bunch of other decks. You'll find good uses for it. Again, just helping get rid of black and red permanents. Usually black permanents. There's a couple really good black creatures out there that we just kind of would like to get the edge on when we go up against them. And then Tormod's Crypt, obviously graveyard decks. If we're going up against Dredge, or if we're going up against some stuff that's using graveyard quite specifically, I'm thinking Storm actually in a lot of cases, Tormod's Crypt will help us stop them from doing their thing. And then the last 2 cards we actually have is Phyrexian Revoker and Witchbane Orb. Obviously, you guys have seen Witchbane Orb before. It is just giving us hexproof, so against decks like Burn, against decks like Storm, against a bunch of combo decks where they need to specifically target us, Witchbane Orb is going to help us get rid of that ability from them, so they're going to have to find another way around us, or we're going to have to find a way of getting rid of Witchbane Orb first. Phyrexian Revoker is the one that's going to probably look a little bit weird to you guys, because Phyrexian Revoker is actually being used to stop Tron specifically in this build, because Phyrexian Revoker, when it enters the battlefield, we name a non-land card, and then activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated. So we go in and we say Karn, or we go in and say Ugin, and then those cards, we have to actually say Karn Liberated, by the way, or Ugin the Spirit Dragon. We can't just say Karn or Ugin because that's not actually a card. We actually have to name a card. Then that card's abilities can't be activated. So one of the big cards example, Ugin is the really big killer for us. Ugin comes in, our opponent minus X's it, and then gets rid of exiles everything with converted mana cost equal to X or less. So if we're going up against Tron, we want to get a Phyrexian Revoker, and we want to name Ugin the Spirit Dragon right away, because then our opponent can't activate their abilities and can't wipe our entire board. This is the entire sideboard. This is the entire deck, but a budget deck, specifically a super budget deck, would never ever be complete without an upgrade section. So let's talk about some upgrades. To start out with, like always, we have land. You can be running Cavernous Souls, Temple Garden, and Windswept Heath. This is going to be making this deck substantially better and a lot more strong, because Cavernous Souls makes it so whatever creature type we name, in this case cats, can't be countered as long as we use Cavernous Souls to actually cast it. These three cards, the way to go if you have the budget, because they're not cheap cards. The next two cards we have are actually both artifacts. We have Adaptive Automation and Metallic Mimic. Both of these are kind of acting like other lords if you're playing just a general tribal deck. Adaptive Automation gives all creatures of the chosen type +1/+1, in this case cats, and then Metallic Mimic, we also choose a creature type, and then whenever a creature of that type enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter, which in a lot of ways is actually better, because we get to make a bunch of, say, tokens, a bunch of stuff like this, and they come in and they get +1/+1, and if Metallic Mimic dies, they still keep their +1/+1 counters, which is awesome, fantastic, amazing, super, you get the idea. The next two cards we have are actually more cats. We have Brimaz, King of Orzekos, and Leonin Arbiter. Both of these cats are fantastic. Obviously, Leonin Arbiter is a better card for the sideboard. I guess you could put it in the main board. We don't really have any search effects, so you could put it in the main board, actually, now that I think about it. But Brimaz is really good to have in the main deck, largely because Brimaz is going to be adding to our go wide strategy, is because whenever he attacks or blocks, you get to put a 1/1 white cat soldier token into play, also attacking or blocking, and it has vigilance as well, which is fantastic. If we're going to be going wide, if you're going to shift this deck into the more go wide token strategy, Brimaz is fantastic. And then Leonin Arbiter, as I was saying before, is really good. I kind of think I would put him in the sideboard, but he also could be really good in the main deck as well. So Leonin Arbiter is players can't search libraries. They can pay 2 to ignore this effect for a turn. So yeah, you basically slow down most decks. I mean, if this is the card you want to put in if you're going against Tron in a lot of cases, because they're not going to be able to go fetch up Tron very easily, because they're not going to be able to search the library, which is super fun for me. So these are two good cards to put in if you are going to upgrade the deck. And then, because I was talking about going to the go wide strategy, we have Anointed Procession and Honor the Pure. Anointed Procession is whenever an effect would create one or more token under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. So because we have a bunch of ways of already creating a bunch of cat tokens, Anointed Procession can actually push it even farther. You're going to really have to go all in on this, and you might actually want to look in putting more than just Brimaz in to make it so it does have more counter token producers. So Anointed Procession, there we go. I'm just saying, it is a really good way if you're going to go wide and you want a ton of tokens. This is the way it was going to do it. And then Honor the Pure is kind of just better than Spear of Heliod because it doesn't have legendary, so you can have 2 of them in play or 3 of them, and it costs a little bit less. The one downside is it doesn't have the Spear of Heliod destroy target creature that dealt damage to you effect. I was actually going to put Honor the Pure in this deck, but because it is now $2.50 or somewhere close to that, I'm not exactly sure the exact price, over $2, it is not really easy to fit into a super budget deck anymore. So we are going to suggest it as an upgrade, a really easy upgrade, because it's only another couple dollars. So that is something I would highly recommend. And then the last 3 cards we're actually going to talk about are actually all removal cards that are actually going to make your deck a lot better. So we have Path to Exile, Stony Silence, and Rest in Peace. Now, Path to Exile replaces our Condemns. It replaces a couple of Oblivion Rings because it allows us to exile a creature, and then our opponent may go fetch up a land, which in a lot of cases, it doesn't really matter. I would want to be running 4 of these in the main deck if you have the money for it. Path to Exile, if you're playing white, Path to Exile is the way to go. It is a really, really good card, so highly recommend it. And then Stony Silence and Rest in Peace are both sideboard cards. If you're going to play this deck a little bit more competitively, if you're going to try and build it into a competitive deck, you need Stony Silence and Rest in Peace, because Stony Silence shuts down almost all of Affinity, a bunch of combo decks, and it also slows down Tron usually pretty bad, because most Tron decks are actually using stuff to go and fetch up Tron, specifically stuff like Expedition Map, which, once you get Stony Silence in play, no longer works. And then Rest in Peace deals with a lot of graveyard strategy decks. It almost completely shuts down Dredge. It shuts down a bunch of the blue decks that are using Snapcaster Mage, which is going to be getting stuff into the graveyard. Also, Rest in Peace also slows down our good old friend Storm. So, Rest in Peace, really good multi-purpose cards. Stony Silence, also really good, because they are much more competitive than the stuff we currently have to run in our sideboard to make this deck work in a competitive-ish fashion. And that is the entire deck. I'm gonna go watch some cat videos now, because this cat deck was amazing. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Giant Monster Games if you want to see more videos just like this. And now, I'm gonna go over and play some games with super budget cats. Until next time, I'm Adrian, Giant Monster Games. Don't forget to game like a giant monster. I want to throw a huge shout out to all of the Patreon supporters, because you guys are helping make videos just like this possible. If you want to join the madness that is Patreon, go over to Patreon, click on the link on the video right now, and become part of the fun.